Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm the City Witch. Today's video I'm going to be talking to you about 4 books I have on Sigil Magick, and I actually don't know why I haven't done this video earlier, guys, so I do apologise for this, because I know we've talked about Sigil Magick before. The first 2 videos I did kind of focused on giving you 5 techniques on how to make sigils and also all the different tips and tricks that I've picked up on over the years for incorporating sigils into your life, using them in your magic and activating them as well. So in this video I thought I'd talk to you about the 4 books that have really helped shape my sigil witchery and gave me lots of useful information. So as always I will score them from 1 to 10. I'll give you insights into what's inside the book and show you some of the pages, and I'll talk to you about the author and what I thought about their writing style and what they included within the book. So, the first book we're going to talk about is this one. It's called A Witch's Guide to Crafting Magic Symbols, Sigil Witchery by Laura Tempest Zakharoff. Now this one I've had for about 3 or 4 years now, and it was a birthday gift. I was super excited to get it, but then slightly disappointed when I read it, and let me explain to you why. So this book is packed full of information, a lot of which is really useful stuff, especially for a beginner. But the first 2 chapters of the book kind of focus, for my taste, too much on the history of art in particular, and on tagging and graffiti and symbolism, and it was just way too much. And I've got plenty of books on that subject already. Symbology is a big subject within the magical community, and we incorporate a lot of symbols over the years from all sorts of different umbrellas of witchcraft. So it kind of made sense to study that subject, which I did extensively for years. And I have books on that. But when I buy books on sigil magic, I want it to be about sigils, not symbols and symbology. And while it does play a part and they kind of go hand in hand, the most basic information and background would have been nice, but not chapters and chapters worth of it. So for me, she droned on just a little bit, and it kind of came across as boring to me. I found myself flipping through pages, scanning them, and kind of going, yeah, get to the point. But that's just me, guys. If you are a beginner and you've not actually read a book on symbol magic before, this would be a wonderful place to start, because the book is packed full of information both on symbology and sigil magic, and it talks to you a lot about the history and background of art, all the different techniques incorporated in designing different tribal patterns and symbols, and how they've been incorporated from, you know, history into modern day practices such as logos and car signs and road signs and all that kind of stuff. So she goes extensively into that, and that's really interesting. But if you've already been through that like I have, you'd get bored. So the introduction to the book is as follows. So you get an introduction on traditional modern witchcraft, what is sigils, and what is sigil magic. And then chapter 1, as I say, is a bit of a history lesson. So in that she talks about eyes, the brain, the hands, different art techniques and how they're all incorporated, like the body of the human being, how that was incorporated into art. And then we get symbols, signs and society. We get embodying symbols, the gateway of the divine, the timelessness of tagging, and the evolution of symbols over the years from history into modern society. Then chapter 2 is information about symbols in general. And this was a little bit better, that chapter, because it does talk to you about symbols of interest that you will come across in witchcraft. So you get basic shapes and signs, elements, directions and numbers, zodiac and astrological signs, letters, colours and other symbols of note. Then in chapter 3, that was the most interesting chapter for me, guys, which is where she talks about how to utilise your symbols, how to create sigils, step-by-step planning and creation, applying sigils and using them in your everyday magic, the art of the vanishing symbol, the symbols on the skin, so actually drawing your sigils on your body and how you can do that safely, devotional sigils, she talks about sigils in motion, the left brain versus the right brain, comparing your sigils. So there's a lot of information in that section which is really good for a beginner and certainly good for an advanced practitioner as well, because there's things in that even I hadn't really incorporated in my sigil magic, and there was things that I hadn't really thought about in depth, and she presented it in a really good way that did get my brain ticking, so I liked that. Chapter 4, design guidance. So in this one she talks to you about setting up for sigil witchery, the instant sacred sphere, Getting over getting it wrong. So this is where people become too rigid in the way they do things. They want to be perfectionists and they don't just stop or let the creative energy flow. So letting your creative juices flow is what I was trying to say. So there she talks a little bit about that and not being, too conformative about your sigils and letting that energy flow naturally. And that was really good as well. She talks about the simple sigil versus the complex design of sigil, drawing techniques and why draw your own sigil as opposed to using someone else's. And then she talks about all the different art supplies and by choosing your art supply, how that means you can incorporate your sigil. So as an example, if you want to do your sigil outside, chalk is wonderful because it's not toxic to the earth at all. You can draw it on all the brickwork of your house, the pavement, even safely on certain aspects of your car, like the rubber and stuff. And as it gets worn away and, rubbed off, the sigil's energy and power is being released throughout that, experience. So if it rains and your sigils get wiped off your home, the energy is being released and you can layer that by keep drawing sigils upon your home as much as you want. So there were certain things like that. There was also using invisible inks. Then there was watercolour pens as well, where you could draw on paper, pop it in water, and as it dissolves and comes out of the paper, then again, the energy is being released. So there was all those sorts of tools and techniques that she was talking about, which was great. Chapter 5 is different exercises that you can incorporate to help you connect with your sigils. And then chapter 6 was the gallery. So this is where she gave you symbols that she's created for you to use in your craft, breaking down why she created it and a little bit of the history behind why she created it. So, the reasoning behind it, why she ended up with that symbol and what she started with. So just a little bit of information about her and that sigil, which was, again, really interesting. Then custom sigils and other artwork. And then she ends with a conclusion and then further resource and reading materials that she recommends as well. So just to show you some of the contents of the book. So this is where she talks a lot about history. Every single bit of doodle or artwork in here tells you as well who did it. So the artist is listed in the book in case you want to look them up. She talks a lot about cultural signs and symbols as well, which was really nice. And this is where she talks about tagging and graffiti. And then this is the bit I really did like. So this bit of the book was probably the most informative section of the book, and it's where she breaks down sigils. So when you look at a sigil, some of you by now have probably seen sigils out there and come across them on, Pinterest and Instagram and, on various different witchy pages and sites and blogs. So when you look at a sigil, often if they've used the traditional method of working with a square, which relates numerologically to a planet, it will be quite zigzaggy and it'll have a lot of straight lines. But then you'll also see more creative sigils that might, incorporate circles and stars and crosses and diamonds and arrows and all sorts of fancy symbols. And you may look at that and go, why did they choose that symbol? What does that mean? What energy does that add to the sigil? Why has it been incorporated? So you're getting that why question quite a lot. So this is where she breaks it down and tells you what they mean. So as an example, so I'm going to read you the circle one, but I'll just show you the page there so you get an idea of what you're looking at. So the circle. Most simply, a circle is a container and can symbolise protection, creating sacred space within it. Or it can be a holder to prevent something from getting out. It can represent wholeness, completion, sacredness, purity and potential. It may also be a sphere, standing in for the symbol of the sun or the full phase of the moon. It can also represent divinity, as in deity or spirit, and or the source of knowledge, and commands, referencing the brain or the nucleus. Circle variations, with a chevron to represent Aurora Borealis, or with a line across it to indicate prohibited or stop signs. So this is what she talks about historically. If you see a circle and it's kind of eating itself, it's representing Aurora Borealis, which is the snake that eats itself, which is a very cultural, historic symbol, which has a lot of its own energies and meanings behind it, which you'd have to research further. But then she says, well, what about a modern symbol? So she's talking about that circle where you get a line through it, which usually means stop, do not go no further, you cannot enter, no entry. So that's a modern symbol that's incorporated in driving and traffic and became a traffic sign. But traditionally it just means stop, you cannot enter. So she talks about modern symbolism versus, historic signs and how you can incorporate them into your symbols. And she gives you that in this book sectioned off into each of the different symbols. So she starts with the dot and the circle, and then she goes into vertical and horizontal lines. Then we have dotted or dashed lines and what they represent, diagonal lines, crosses. So chevron, so that's what that is, guys. When you see those, that's what they're called. Then you have X's and arrows, and again the arrows are really interesting because she even tells you based on whether it's pointing, you know, left, right, up, down. She's telling you what that would represent and the energy. So if something is going kind of, you know, from the west to the east, the west represents the past traditionally, and the east is the future. So if I was pointing that way, it's, you know, pointing the energy going forward into the future, not backwards into the past. So again, you can start to break down a sigil and figure out what energies are present by looking at these things that are in there. Then she talks about wavy lines and zigzag lines, triangles and squares, diamonds and rectangles. Then we've got spirals and swirls and crescents. Now again, with the spiral, whenever you see a spiral going from the outside and it's curling into the centre, this is pulling something in like a vortex, summoning something towards you, manifesting something into your life. But if you see it the opposite way, where it's going from the centre out, that's pushing, that's banishing, rejection, don't want it, get rid of it. You know, so again, when you're looking at sigils and it's telling you it's a banishing sigil, but you see the spiral going that way, someone's incorrectly drawn that, because why would you banish but then pull something in? That's a complete opposite energy. So, you know, understanding your sigils is quite important, guys. Understanding what you're incorporating into your sigil and why a symbol's being chosen as part of that symbol can be quite important. Then we've got pentagon and a hexagon. We've got stars and polygons. We've got septograms. We've got I don't know what I can't pronounce that, but yeah, those kinds of things. We've got hearts and eye symbols, loops and infinity signs, wings, wields and shields, keys, butterflies and ankhs. You know, the list kind of goes on, guys. And then she even talks to you about the elementals, symbols of the triangles and incorporating them. She talks about, you know, leaves and flowers and raindrops, you know, all the different things that might represent an element that you want to incorporate. You know, so that the earth, you're going to see flower patterns and leaves. Those kinds of designs should be in the sigil. So she goes into directions as well and incorporating those. And that kind of, you know, it goes on quite a long list, guys. But that section of the book I found really informative because, you know, when you look at something, you kind of want to know why that's been incorporated or intuitively why it's been chosen. You also get a lot of pictures of the author of the book as well in various poses, doing various different sigils. She gives you sigils throughout the book as well that she's created, tells you what they are, why they were created and their purpose. She shows you all the different ways she's used them as well by putting them on bags, doodling them onto the books, sketch pads and so on. She talks to you about making charms, carving them into your altar. So stirring them into your coffee, and actually I did a tea video recently where we talked about sigils. And then here, this was the bird seed. So this was about putting bird seed out, but drawing it in a pattern, a sigil you've designed, and then enchanting it. And as the birds take it, they free it out into the world and they enchant the world around them using the energy that you put into the seed. So again, really interesting stuff, guys. And then when you get to the back of the book, she gives you some sigils that she's created that you can go away and use for yourself. And again, there's a number of those throughout the book. So overall, I would score this an 8 out of 10. I liked her writing style. I didn't find her boring. Just the stuff about the history lesson she was trying to give at the beginning was a bit dull to me. But the rest of the book is gold. There is lots of information that I've struggled to find over the years or hasn't really been fully explained, and in this she did that beautifully. So I would definitely say 8 out of 10. I would definitely recommend it for a beginner, and if you're an advanced practitioner and this is information that you don't have, again, it's worth having in your collection, guys, because she does break it down very well and make it easy for you to understand sigil witchery. I will say a lot of her methods in this are creative though. She doesn't seem to work with any occult methods or any standardized methods where you're using the planetary charts, astrological signs and the houses of the star signs. She doesn't use any of that to make her sigils, which is quite traditional and occulty, ritualistic kind of magic. She tends to go with more creative, free-flowing energy and something that really speaks to you in the moment, which I liked. So something to note about that book, guys. Then moving on to the next book, this one's called Practical Sigil Magic, Creating Personal Symbols for Success by Frater UD. I hope I'm saying that right. Frater. I'm terrible with names, I've said that before. So that's this book, guys. And this was the very first book I ever had on Sigil Magic, and I love this book. He really broke this down so you understand sigils. Now, in the book, he talks to you about practical methods for creating them, magical spell methods, alphabets of desire, working with various different energies, how it all works, and structuring your sigils using planetary energies. And he talks to you about the theory of sigils and the exploration of the power word. So there was a lot of good information in this book, and I thoroughly loved it. I read it from cover to cover. He does a lot of this kind of breakdown for you, where he'll start with something, but then he'll break it down and end up with a sigil at the end. And he walks you through it step by step as well, so you don't get confused at all. So he'll show you the various different symbols you might come across. Let's show you something else. I know there's something in here about the man. There we go. So working with a person, he'll show you the person and then how you break that down, and then further break that down to turn it into a sigil. And that's what he ended up with. Now personally, I'd have stopped there, but I think he takes it one step further. So he starts to like break it down further. I'll turn it that way so you can see, guys. So again, turn it into that. Now personally, I don't like that one, but you know, personal preference. Again, mixing symbols, so you know, working with these, and then what he ended up with here to design a brand new sigil based off of symbols that you use in witchcraft. So that was interesting as well. Here's a further breakdown. So again, you can quite happily see what he's done, why he's done it. He gives you a lot of information and techniques in this book. One of my favourite techniques, which actually I had not come across before, it was completely unique to this book, was using automatic writing to make a sigil. So here you can quite easily see that he basically got in the zone, opened up his third eye, and he just thought about what he wanted the sigil to do, accessing a certain energy or focusing on intent, and then he just let his hand go, and he just kind of drew a mess basically, but then from that mess he pulled out something that spoke to him, and then he turned it into sigil. And now personally, I think that just looks like a squiggly mess, so I would probably embellish that and focus on it a bit more and turn it into something else. So you may have that as your master symbol that's in the center of maybe a circle, and then you surround it with smaller designs and patterns that you wish to incorporate. But I did like that. I did like the idea of using automatic writing in order to design a sigil. That's not something I've come across before. It's extremely creative. It's obviously completely in the moment as well, and nobody is going to know what that is at all. In fact, you might even forget if you don't label it, because it's just so unique. And I loved that. I thought it was great. And then again, he broke it down even further, and he's showing you how he can turn that into something really unique. So there's some really good stuff in this book, guys. Really liked it. And then of course he goes into great detail about using the planetary squares and making sigils like that using their energies as well. It gives you all of those squares. It'll give you the Hebrew letter table and the number one as well, so you can choose both methods. It's up to you. And then he gives you all the information about that as well. So with Jupiter, he's giving you all the seals, all the information, so that you can work with all of this information and energy to make a unique sigil for your particular spell, whatever it is that you're working on. And he does give you a further reason list at the back. So again, a wonderful book, guys. This is my first one, so a lot of the techniques you saw in my second video where I showed you how to make sigils, a lot of it came from this, although I didn't do the automatic writing one, so I may do that on a video to show you how I would do that. But yeah, I love that book. 9 out of 10 from me, guys. Wonderful book, and definitely worth every penny spent on it. And then we come to the last two. Now, the last two are by the same author, Volume 1 and Volume 2, and they're called The Fundamental Book of Sigil Magic, and they're by K.P. Theodore. So this is the Volume 1, and then we have the Volume 2. Now, I bought these for £10 each on Amazon, really cheap to get, and to be honest, there was some really mixed reviews online, but I was surprised because when I got the books, I fucking loved them. They were great, guys. Absolutely wonderful books, filled with information, packed with knowledge, and the breakdown and the way he walks you through how to create a sigils is so simple to understand. Honestly, you just could not get confused at all. This author was wonderful. So in the introduction, so you get an introduction on sigils, creating your sigils. So there's a word method and a pictorial method, and he breaks down both of those for you really easily. Then creating a sigil, he talks about the procedure, he talks about activation, pronunciation guide, and physical sigil activation. And then he gives you sigils at the back of the book, which is broken up into mental sigils and physical sigils. So you get two different types within this book. So just to show you his breakdown so you can understand. So he does the word method, like what I've shown you, where he will remove all the vowels and any doubles of a statement. Then he will start to play around with the design, and he may continue and he'll show you the breakdown, the evolution of that, until he ends up with a final sigil. And again, that just keeps going until he breaks it down. Then he shows you, again, breaking down a person. So for this one, this is a pictorial method. So again, showing you that he kind of, went from those two first pictures into this and then eventually into that. Now I'd have stopped there because I love that. I think that's great. But he didn't stop there. He carried on. And that's what he ended up with. But I don't like that as much as the other one. So I'd have personally just stopped there. But personal preference. Then he talks to you about the sigils themselves. This is where he gives you lots of sigils at the back of the book. And honestly, this just goes on and on and on, guys. Like, there are hundreds of sigils in this book, loads of them, and you will just, honestly, I've used a lot of these and they are wonderful. Really like how they're creative, really like their energies, love what I was seeing, and there is a sigil for everything in here. And if you can't find one, he gives you techniques at the beginning of the book to actually help you design your own sigil. So that's volume 1, and then volume 2, he takes it a step further. So in this one, he talks to you about working with alphabets, like magical alphabets. So this is where we get really magical with this one. So creating sigils and the word method, and then using alphabets, runes, the oghlam, combinations, and arithmetic sigils. I think I'm saying that right. And then again, he breaks it further down into some of the ones he created into mental and physical at the back. So he gives you, again, a massive collection. So just to show you his breakdown of some of these methods. So again, here's a further breakdown for you guys, where he's showing you your statement and then how he's breaking that down in order to create the sigil he ended up with. Then working with alphabets. So here he's showing you the alphabet of the Magick, and then he's showing you the sigil, but how he broke it down and built upon it to end up with this, using all the letters from that alphabet. And then again, he does the same thing with the Enochian one. And that's kind of what he ended up with. Let's go to a different one. So Theban is kind of this style here, and that is what he ended up with. So again, you can see the breakdown of all of the sigils. So he's showing you the breakdown of what that means. And then obviously you can figure out what letters they are based on the alphabet he's already given you. So you know what that sigil is going to be and how you would go about creating one in a similar fashion. Same with this particular alphabet. And then on the next page, he breaks it down for you so you can understand why he ended up with that and what he did. Then we talk about the oghlam and pictorish, and I love the pictorish one because it's all these swirls, and I use a lot of these in my sigils. So that's where a lot of when you see that in my videos, this is where it came from, this book. And then runes. So here he shows you working with runes, and he gives you the full alphabet as well in the book. And then he shows you how he broke that down and created a bind rune, combining two or three runes together in order to make something unique. And then he does the same thing with the oghlam. So he gives you the full alphabet and shows you. And then here's the alphabet, and then here's a rune he created using this alphabet. So again, wonderful. And he does that through so many different techniques, guys, so many different alphabets. There are loads in here. It just goes on and on and on. Then he provides you with square tables. And again, these all connect to different planetary energies. And he talks to you about working with them. He shows you how to break things down into a numerical value as well, so that you can work with those energies and design some sigils for yourself. And then after that, he goes into giving you a full list of sigils. And this is where we see the different combinations of using like the automatic writing style, using something a bit more free-flowing and curly as opposed to something straight and complex. Then later on, we do see that he mixes the two. So this is where you see some straight lines coming in, but then some curly whirlies as well. He does mention that in the book and the method behind that. And again, this book is packed with them. So we've got reconciliation, study mindset, spiritual purity. We've got, where are we now? Elementals. So for elementals, we've got the ether, the element of air, darkness and earth, fire and light, metal, spirit, water, wood. Then we've got all of the different Sabbaths. Then we've got all different witchy tools, the cauldron, the chalice, the atham, the grimoire. And then at the back of the book, we have a full list of crystals as well, where he designed sigils for those. So again, absolutely wonderful book, guys. Really, really enjoyed it. So both of those were my faves, because not only did they give you the techniques that you do see in the first two books, but packed full of sigils already created for you that either you can photocopy and use, or you can build upon to turn into something unique for yourself. You could use them as smaller sigils as well. So if you wanted to create something, you know, quite large and round, you could embellish smaller sigils from that book around the outside, but then your master sigil could be in the middle, which is the main focus of the energy. And you're backing it up with smaller sigils as well, turning it into something completely unique for your craft. So absolutely wonderful. 10 out of 10 from me for both those books, guys. I love them. And despite the reviews online, I thought they were worth every penny. So that's all I've got for you today, guys. So those 4 books by those 3 authors. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and click the bell so YouTube will tell you when my next video comes out. And if you'd like to support my channel, you can do that through Patreon. And if you'd like to look at any of my client work that I do for businesses, all of the links are in the description, so please feel free to do that. And if you have any questions, you can email me, and the email is also in the description, guys. Thank you very much for watching. As always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon. Blessed be.